Hey guys, welcome back to Spector Creative. I'm your host, Scott Toy Guru Netilich, and I want to talk about something that I don't talk about that often, GI Joe Classified. I haven't done that many videos about it, and actually specifically want to talk about it compared to Masters of the Universe, Masterverse. So let's dive in and see how these two homegrown, home-owned properties are so different with collectors and at retail. Hey guys, so I know I make a lot of videos here on Spector Creative about lines that I actively collect. Like Marvel Legends and Star Wars Vintage Series and to some slight extent Star Wars Black Series. I pick and choose. Um, Two lines I don't really give enough, I guess, YouTube time to are GI Joe Classified, and it's been a while since I've talked about He-Man lines at retail. The reason I want to talk about these two is because both lines were created by toy companies. As far as I know, I guess Mattel now owns Masters from Universal. I don't know. All I know is I spent 8 months of my life working extremely hard to put together a proposal to buy back Masters of the Universe from Universal, and Universal told us no. So maybe things changed since I left Mattel. I don't know. But whether or not Mattel owns the full rights to the brand, they're still making the toys, right, at retail. And GI Joe is outrightly owned by Hasbro. They even bought back the entertainment rights very smartly about 15 years ago. The reason I want to make this video is, honestly, I am extremely jealous of GI Joe fans. I mean, GI Joe Classified, I think, is one of the best toy lines out at market, and I own one. This guy, I bought a Cobra Commander because I wanted him for my villain shelf. I actually wish I got a Destro as well, but let's get into that in a moment. So, looking at the release strategies and the retail strategies of both Masters of the Universe and GI Joe, Hasbro, Mattel are very, very different, and that's what I want to talk about today. Classified has gone so deep, like super deep. I'm honestly so jealous, like I said, of GI Joe fans because they have such an amazing toy line out right now. And versus Masters at Mattel, the Origins line, which is the articulated version of the vintage figures, it's still chugging along. I mean, it's doing, it's not quite at retail. I mean, some of the, I think there's some deluxe figures at retail right now, Snakeface and Dragon Blaster Skeletor I saw. But for the most part, what's at retail is the Filmation line and the Turtles of Grayskull. And Masterverse has turned into, New Eternia, and then they're turning into, I forgot the name of the name of the third brand, but basically what Mattel's been doing is rebooting MOTU every year and a half in order to basically redo the main characters. They haven't really gone deeper than about 20 characters in before changing the 6-inch, 7-inch line. As I said, Origins has gone on longer and probably has more of a life because it's very inexpensive to do. Very little deco, and you can do so many characters at that scale with shared parts because it's embracing the vintage lines shared part aesthetic, shall we say? The way there were only a couple major bodies: insect, human, beastie, reptile, and they would swap around parts, which is why Whiplash and Buzz-Off have the same feet. All right, so going back with GI Joe, they have managed to go so deep, way more than 20 figures deep. They're like, 150 figures deep. And why is this? Well, a big reason is there's been a huge lack of GI Joe product at market. Now, obviously, we have GI Joe product, and there's been, lots of different scales. 12-inch was super popular for about 30 years before, unfortunately, the fan base kind of fell out. I mean, they were still there. They just weren't as big enough to continue to support it. And because of that, the demand from the customer has outpaced product availability, more or less. So, for example, Bobby Valaverse, who used to work at Hasbro, he actually pitched doing what became GI Joe Classified when he was still there. They weren't doing it at the time, so he left and he formed his own sort of GI Joe line, Action Force. But then, like a year later, Hasbro finally woke up and like, oh, maybe we should make 6-inch highly articulated versions of our own brand, GI Joe. And because we own them, we can put even more quality and more production into them, which is why if you take a GI Joe classified figure and compare it to a Marvel Legends or a Star Wars Black Series, also from Hasbro, you'll see a definite quality, piece count, deco count, I guess, upside to a GI Joe classified figure because they're not paying royalty. On Star Wars and Marvel, Hasbro is paying like 20 points of royalty. So that's a, that's a lot. That's 20 cents for every dollar put into that figure is going to the licensor, as opposed to with Hasbro owning GI Joe, zero. They don't have to pay anything, so they can put that into the toy. For the first couple years, they struggled with that, wanting to make sure their licensed and homegrown 6-inch were at the same quality level for perceived value for customers at retail. But I think by year 3 or 4, they kind of realized, okay, we own this. We're just going to put as many alternate hands and deco hits and accessories in as with what we can, which is actually what Bobby pitched originally, was doing that, embracing the lack of a royalty fee with G.I. Joe. So with Masters, then, you get, as I said, it's like the same 20 figures over and over again. They just sort of keep changing the aesthetic. And a big part of this is because there have been Heat Masters of the Universe figures for collectors consistently for the last 20 years. And I'm counting 2000X, I'm counting Classics, and then right into Origins and Masterverse. Versus G.I. Joe went a decade and a half with nothing. And that's a big reason, that pent-up demand and the lack of a royalty has allowed Hasbro to really expand the line. For Masters, the reason that they don't go as deep, I think, again, because there's been consistently Masters of the Universe product out there for the last 20 years or so, and it was a property in time that, Masters was all about big, beefy, huge heroes, and in the 80s, that's who everyone was, right? Stallone and Val Kilmer and Schwarzenegger and, Louis Tully, all those characters were huge and buff, and that's why Masters worked. It was a moment in time. It's why it's always had a hard time relaunching and reinvigorating kids because of that. Because Masters was kind of a celebration of the 1980s. Not that G.I. Joe wasn't. I mean, it was a very, U.S. versus Russia kind of thing, but the whole army versus army is a lot easier, especially with modern, kids like having characters that have tech as opposed to swords. Lightsabers sell better than broadswords, put it that way. Sci-fi and G.I. Joe leans into sci-fi more so than Masters. Yes, Masters does have some sci-fi aspects, but that's a big reason. It's, it took so long for Hasbro to pull the trigger that by the time they did, the pent-up demand was huge, and that is why they are just able to go so deep into the character selection and offer such high quality. And again, I'm so jealous of G.I. Joe classified fans. All right, so what do you guys think? And I guess the last thing is what G.I. Joe also hasn't done is they haven't gone back and re-released the major characters that much. They did a Walmart program on vintage cards, and I wish I took more advantage of that to get, as I said, to get Destro. Because you can't just walk into Target right now and buy the main characters. They're on these like C and D list. Versus MOTU, that's pretty much all you get is A-list characters. So it's a very different strategy, very different fan bases, and very different moments in time. I'd love to know what you guys think. Have you noticed this as well? And are you collecting, MOTU and Classifieds still? And if you are a Classifieds fan, wow, yeah, you're getting some great stuff. Lots of animals, lots of weapons, lots of tech, lots of vehicles. I mean, crazy. But G.I. Joe fans they have been denied product for a long time, and that's why they're finally getting this good stuff. All right, I hope this video addressed all those issues, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I love to get suggestions for other topics to cover, and I'll see you guys in the next video.